Hello, I am Sam Sorenson. I am the director of Pandemia, which is a short film that takes place right at the beginning of the pandemic in March of 2020 and is based as a bunch of strangers are in a dentist office kind of anticipating what is happening in the next room. And it's something that nobody expects.
That's great, Sam. You were with us last year with your other film,
Yes.
and so that you're 2 years in a row with us.
And I'm delighted to be back. And thank you very much for having us back.
Yeah, last year was virtual. This year is in person, so it'll be nice to meet you in person this year.
I look forward to it. Yes, absolutely.
Let's give a little bit about your background here. You're Emmy award-winning filmmaker and TV veteran, 20 Emmy nominations. You also won the prestigious Edward R. Murrow Award and several Associate Press and Wisconsin Broadcaster Award Associations. So that background tells me you were more into the photojournalist reporting end of things for a while.
That's correct. So I got my start in television news and I worked in La Crosse for a number of years and then worked in Madison for about 14 years. And in that time, covered a lot of local news, of course, but also went to Iraq with a local, the 229 Engineer Company, which is based out of Platteville and Prairie du Chien. So we got embedded with them, and that was a big part of my, kind of journalistic career. Did one 24-hour overnight with the Madison Fire Department, so did an entire 24-hour shift with them, kind of essentially embedded with fire department. So those are a couple of like the career highlights that I had. But yes, I started off in TV. Everything I know about shooting came from TV. So then when I started working with short films, started my own company, I still do a lot of documentary work, but I use completely different cameras. So everything that I used to use was ENG cameras. It was a one lens with a huge focal length, and there was no ISO in those cameras. So everything that I've learned since then, I've had to kind of rewire my thinking in terms of what is appropriate video. Composition is still kind of similar, but in terms of setting up the shot, it's a completely different thing for me. So the TV career set me up nicely for a lot of things, like making sure you have good composition, the right colors. Audio was huge, but I had to totally relearn camera and how to build it for narrative film.
The thing about TV and broadcasting and being a news reporter and being on the go is you have to think of that stuff like fast.
Yes.
When you're in a situation, you're setting up your camera, and if something happens, you got to compose it fast, and you have to make sure you got good audio fast too.
That's right. I mean, that served me well in terms of some of the stuff that I'll do now for my business. We will go out and shoot documentary style video, and that is essentially reacting to the environment. You're not setting a lot of stuff up. You're not really dictating how things go. You just gather as much as you can, as cleanly as you can. So you're right. That's how journalism worked. And that was really what I did for 18 years before I switched lanes a little bit.
Your company is called Studio 88.
Yes.
So your journalism background works well with your documentary approach to what you're doing now. It's not the same thing, but it's a lot of similarities there.
Absolutely. The nice thing is with what I do now, I just have a little bit more time. Like you mentioned, in the old news days, we'd go out and get 4 stories in a day sometimes and have to put them all together for the 4, 5, 6, and 10 p.m. reports. So that was just a lot of grind, a lot of turnaround, and then quality is inherently going to suffer. Mm-hmm. So now I can go, if Land's End sends me to Boston for a shoot, I can do a 2-day shoot, and then I can spend a month editing, and it's a completely different sensibility in terms of the final product.
You change gears a little bit because the film you sent us last year was a narrative. This is a narrative. Yep. So that's a different type of muscle you're using at the same time.
Yeah. Yes. But the cool thing is, for me, TV was always, it was exciting, it was fun, and it was a really great way to meet a lot of people. But I always loved narrative film. My brothers and I, always growing up, were like, let's go make a home video with our VHS. And we would like write little stories. And My younger brother ended up becoming an actor and moved to LA and has been in a number of high-level productions that.
Can I interrupt you there? He's in the film, right? Did I recognize him? He's in the film?
Okay, I've got two brothers.
Oh, okay.
One of them is the actor who was not able to make it for this year's film.
Okay.
But I do have a younger brother who did, who is also, even though he ended up going into kind of ministry and a totally different path, he's still a natural ham. So he's perfect for these projects that I sometimes bring him in for.
You've ventured into the 48.
Yes.
And you have to make something in 48 hours. And your news background probably comes in handy with that.
Absolutely. Are your viewers familiar with 48?
Why don't you give us a brief rundown in case they aren't? We had another film that was a 48 film and they talked about it, but they might not see every one of these.
Sure. So the 48-hour film project, it's in its 20th year. It's international. It's in 100 plus cities now. And that includes Milwaukee, it includes Madison, Chicago, LA, Paris, London. And essentially what it is you have 48 hours to make a film. It's a 4 to 7 minute short. And on Friday night, you get multiple elements. So you get a character, a line of dialogue, and a prop that must be used in all the films in that city. And typically there'll be 30 teams in a city. And then every team gets a different genre. And from there, as soon as you draw the genre and you get all the elements, it's go time. And you have 48 hours to write it, to shoot it, edit it, score it, and finalize it and get it in time for it to be a legal film for that contest. Really intense project. There is very little sleep, but it really is a chance to just dive in, flex all your creative muscles as fast as you can. And the greatest part of it is at the end of it, you have a film. You've gotten together with a crew, a bunch of friends, sometimes people you're just meeting for the first time, and you've created this work of art that you will have forever.
Now, you told me before we started this that this project was actually a 48-hour film. I didn't realize that when I watched it, because there's certain characteristics you can see in a 48 film and go, okay, yeah, that was made for the 48. Like their logo is always in front, and you can kind of tell when a prop has to be used. I really did not know that this was a 48-hour film when I watched it.
I'll take that as a compliment, because 48, I mean, that's the one thing about the 48 is it creates the time pressure. Sometimes things get lost, like you'll drop some audio out, you'll have some problems. For this one, we're able to clean up some things afterwards to submit it to film festivals, but I really didn't clean up a lot. And what happened this year, and what I've found as I've done the 48s over time, is once you start to have some success, and our team has had some success, then people start to gravitate towards you. So this year I had a DP for the first time. Normally I'm shooting it. This time I was directing and had a DP, and this guy is someone who is phenomenal. He's worked on Chicago Fire. He's worked on features. He works on shows for the Discovery Channel that he directs. So he just knows how to build a scene. So much of the cinematic look that we were able to accomplish is directly a result of his experience. And I also, because of my business, I've shot multiple commercials. So of course you interact with actors and you say, hey, would you ever, there's no pay for this, but it's 48, it's all volunteer. If you're ever interested in having a fun weekend. So every once in a while, someone will say, sure, give me a call. And so we've had Julia Daly now for the last couple of years, and she's had feature film experience. And she is awesome to work with, super fun person, extremely talented actor. So when we get like that kind of talent into the group, then all of a sudden you're elevating the project. And instead of me telling my brothers and my kids what to do, we've got a completely different sensibility on set.
It was interesting watching it. I thought the dramatic buildup was very good. The surprise at the end was excellent.
Thank you.
Just the visuals alone too with that. But with the 48, you have to find these locations pretty fast, don't you? You shot in a school, you shot in a dentist's office.
Yep.
How were you able to secure those locations so fast?
So within the rules, the two things that you can do beforehand are secure locations and secure crew and cast. So you basically tell a bunch of people, anyone who's willing to show up at 8 o'clock at this location. And then you usually, well, what I have found is I'll reach out to multiple people and secure maybe 8 locations as possibilities.
Mhm.
And then once we get everything on that Friday night and we figure out what the story is going to be and I start writing the script, then we tell 6 people, thanks, but no thanks, maybe next time. And then we alert the 2 others, okay, we're coming to the school, make sure the janitor's there to let us in. And then the dentist office that we used this year is a good friend of mine. He owns it. So that was beautiful because then we could be there and didn't have to worry about a timeline. We ended up going very late into the night to make sure we got all the shots we needed. And yeah, so locations are really challenging for the 48. But if you work with a couple of people who own the building or have access to the building and can get you enough fluidity that you're not going to be rushed, then you're set.
Let's talk about the story of your film a little bit. You wrote it.
Yes.
How this idea come to you? I mean, you actually had to write it pretty fast because it's a 48, but where did the idea come from?
So I mentioned the genre, and the genre we got this year was a period piece, which a lot of times people will go Victorian period or Old West. And we decided to come closer because I always like to make these films in a moment that sort of encapsulates where we are today, because I've been doing it for 15 years and it's fun to look back and say, oh yeah, that was really important at that time. So this year we set it in the pandemic, the very beginning of the pandemic in March. And right away, I wanted to reacquaint myself with the sensibility then, because even though it's only been 2 years, it's already changed so much. I mean, if you remember back then, the CDC was saying, don't wear a mask. There's no need for a mask. How much did that change? At that time, it was a vaccine is probably years away, you know, and of course it ended up being by the end of the year. So a lot of the things that have changed, I think audiences would have forgotten. So my wife, who is a journalist, I immediately said, go back and find all of the headlines from March of 2020, and let's try to ping pong those into the storyline to remind people of where we are. And really, it's a reminder of how much things have changed. And then out of that, we had to incorporate these required elements. So we had a gym teacher, we had a flower petal, and a line of dialogue. So the story ended up, I worked with my DP and a couple other people who we got our heads together and said, what's feasible? What can we do? And people threw out a couple options. And once I said, you know, my friend is offering his dental office, people went, ooh, that's got some dramatic possibilities. Yeah. So once we settled on the basics of the story, like there's this dentist who has this relationship with a patient, and who are these other patients there in the midst of the pandemic, and kind of utilizing the waiting room as a sense of where the entire world was in terms of the tension of being in that space and not knowing what the pandemic is going to bring, sort of like the idea of anticipating what the pulling teeth is going to be like for those in the waiting room. So we tried to kind of draw on that a little bit and then build a dramatic story out of that. But again, it's one evening. So I started working on this at 9 p.m. by the time we fleshed out some of the ideas, and it took me forever. So I wasn't done with the script until 5 a.m., which then meant, 2 hours of sleep, and then it's shoot time, and the shoot went really long, and then I edited the whole thing. So it was a haul.
Wow. You got 2 hours sleep in 48 hours.
Yep, that's right.
You slept much since then, though, right?
Right. I caught up immediately afterwards.
Okay.
Which is typical. Like, that's how these go. And that's part of the fun of it, is just being able to push yourself to that area. And then creative thoughts kind of can happen in that space that maybe you wouldn't otherwise have if you were well rested.
How's the film doing? Is it being well received? Have you sent it out to other festivals?
It is. Like, we actually won a festival in Turkey, which was cool. And we've gotten a lot of, so it's up for consideration in multiples. It's been accepted into 3. And then we're sending it out to multiple places because, like I said before we started rolling, you know, I think I've done 9 or 10 48s over the years, and hopefully get better as time goes on. But this is one that really I feel proud of. I mean, everything came together. The performances were great. Having Lance as the DP was, like I said, it elevated it. Having Julia, and the way we had to sit down before this pivotal scene, and she kind of wanted to she pushed back on some of the dialogue and said, I don't think this makes sense. And so we were able to modify it on the fly to make her character feel more attached to her performance. And then
It was
in
very
the
good.
performance, yeah, she's phenomenal.
Mhm.
But even in the performance, she took it another direction that I wasn't expecting. So we all, as the crew, all just watched her sort of go through this transformation, and we just kind of took a step back and just, it was her and the camera for a while. And that, as that was happening, I knew I'm gonna be making a different cut of this after the 48. I'm just to make sure I clean it up perfectly, and I'm gonna send this to film festivals, because I felt it kind of elevating as her performance was unfolding in real time.
Yeah, I'm a filmmaker as well, and you could, when you see an actor kind of connect like that, you know that your film is going to be a better film with performances like that.
Absolutely. I mean, they get, actors get a lot of flack for kind of being prima donnas sometimes, or because like you have to cater to them, and she's not like that at all, of course. But you can see the need for creating a space for them to operate in that is totally different than the sound guy who can just kind of show up in sweatpants and be eating a granola bar as he's doing his job. So
Yeah.
there's like creating that space and watching her carve out this little reality in front of us all. It was pretty magical. I mean, that was one of the moments that I went, oh, this is the pixie dust that Hollywood kind of talks about, with all of the baggage that comes along with that stuff. That was a moment that really was special to me.
No, thank you so much, Sam, for doing this morning.
It's my pleasure, and thank you again for having us. And I'm excited to meet all the other filmmakers, and I will be there. And thank you again.
You're welcome.